All right, so good afternoon. I am Jim Atkinson, the Director of Programs and Services here at ArtPride, New Jersey. I want to welcome you to today's webinar. We're really happy to have Jenny Cohn with us from TRG Arts, tuning in all the way from LA. So one of the reasons why it's an afternoon webinar today is to spare Jenny from having to get up at 5 a.m. To have to lead this. But we're going to be covering she's going to cover like a state of AIM, like where we are with the Audience and Site Manager program for 2026. We're going to talk about exploring how to transform data into actionable baseline for patron loyalty growth, examining how to leverage census data to strategically identify, target, and track audiences by race and ethnicity. And then we'll be concluding at the end of the webinar. We're going to do some training focused on best practices around audience segmentation, and then how to actually do a walkthrough of uploading your patron data into the data center platform. So if you are an experienced data center user, you can feel free to tune out for that last piece of the webinar. That's why we put it last. But for those that are newer to it or just need a refresher, it's going to be a nice reminder to you about how to best use the tool. So then before we get started, I wanted to say that closed captioning is available under the More button in the bottom nav of your Zoom menu. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature. Drop them into Q&A, and then I'll be able to field them and ask Jenny as we go along so we can keep things moving really smoothly. If we have any links to share, or if you just want to say hi to everybody else, in the room, you can certainly feel free to use the chat for that. Or if you have something really specific you need to let us know, you can use the chat tool for that. And we will be recording today's webinar and sharing the slide deck. So you don't have to feverishly take notes. We'll have that available to you so that you can reference it later. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Jenny Cohn from TRG. So thanks for being with us today, Jenny.
Hi, thank you for having me. As Jim said, I'm from TRG Arts. I can't see who all is here at the moment, but I'm sure I've met some of you in the past. We are just going to dive in with some data, and I just told Jim I have thrown a lot of data in here because my colleagues just put together a lovely presentation of kind of the state of North American arts and culture for 2025. That has some really interesting insights and things in it outside of what's going on in New Jersey. So I've thrown a lot of data in here. Jim's going to help me keep on track. But if we don't get through all of it, you will have the presentation afterwards, and you can kind of dive into the national trends that we're seeing. First of all, I just want to say hello and welcome. These are all of our 2026 AIM members, which are a lot of organizations, 47 this year. It's very exciting. I know we have a couple of brand new ones and a lot of returning folks. So we love to see it. Alrighty. So just a couple of highlights on AIM numbers generally. So you're up to almost 3 million unique mailable households in your network, which is huge. And looking back at my colleague Andrew's presentations from some of these historically, it's a 51% increase in the past 18 months, which is gigantic. So thank you for importing all of your data and continuing to use the tool. This is a lot. Almost 3 million households is a lot of folks. So congrats on the growth. And then along with those 3 million, we have 1.27 million households that have home phone numbers and 1.3 million households that have email addresses. So yes, while we can't trade email addresses and phone numbers, we like to look at that because obviously the more complete our patron records, the more likely we are to be able to communicate with folks directly and get them to come back and all of that fun stuff. So those numbers at almost half is a really great sign. All right, so your top 5 zip codes by household numbers. This didn't change a whole lot from the last time that Andrew presented this to you. We have Princeton and New Brunswick and Morristown and Monroe Township and Somerset. I know very little about my New Jersey geography, I'm sorry to say. I did spend a couple of fall seasons working at theaters there, so I know that you can never turn left and you can't pump your own gas. But that's about the extent of my New Jersey knowledge. But it looks like these are popular zip codes and have been historically, so these probably aren't a surprise to you. Okay, demographics. So, when I send this to you, I might put in the slides that Andrew had from last time, just so you can see the change, because it is interesting. So we have about 66%, this first um, pie chart over here. 66% of your folks are married. We have just under half completed high school, 29% completed a college degree, and then 24% completed graduate school. There's some really interesting data around education level in the census data I'm going to show you a little bit later. That's really interesting. You have a lot of higher ed in New Jersey, so interesting numbers there. And then we're
Yeah,
about half.
just Jenny, real quick on that point.
Yeah,
We've been talking about this in our regional marketing groups, and it's been interesting to see that number fluctuate over the last 10 years or so, because that number of the percentage of patrons who had a college degree of some kind, whether it was undergraduate or graduate, used to make a much bigger piece of the pie. So
yeah.
we're definitely seeing that level out a bit, which has definitely been an interesting thing to watch.
Yeah, when we dive into the census data, you can also look at the degrees achieved by socioeconomic level and by race and ethnicity, and it's fascinating to see how the numbers shift and change. It's expensive. Higher ed's expensive. Um, so presence of children is 50-50. And I noticed even the year ago, there were less children in this stat. So it doesn't surprise me as well if we're looking at the generation. The median age in New Jersey is 40. So, you've got a lot of millennials in the population who are the prime parenting years right now. So it makes sense to me that the child percentage is increasing. So just to remind folks about this pie chart over here, the blue are the baby boomers, so about 40%. The red are the Gen Xers, 30%. The kind of seafoamy green are the millennials at 18%. And then the gray are Gen Z, which we know are the youngest folks that we currently have. And then going all the way back to the older folks, greatest generation is prior to 1928, tiny sliver there. And then the kind of mustardy color are the silent generation folks. So this is pretty average for what we see. Most of our patrons are baby boomers and Gen X. Millennials are the highest percent of increase generation right now. So I would say if you don't have a lot of millennials in your patron base, that it's worth maybe thinking about how to engage with them a little bit more. Okay, this is just a screenshot from the census data website I'm going to take you to in a little bit, but I thought this was really interesting. So in your AIM data, you have about 60% female, 40% male, which again is very common in arts and culture generally. It always skews more female than male. But I thought this was an interesting chart. So this is the whole state of New Jersey. And this is 2023. When I take you to this website in a little bit, you can toggle back and forth between all the years and see how things have changed. But the red is the female and the blue is the male. So you'll see population-wise, it is relatively balanced. It's slightly more female than male, but it is interesting to look at some of the different age brackets to see, again, this is the 300,000 here. So at the 35 to 39, it's like slightly more male than female, and then it kind of fluctuates. So anyway, it's just a cool visualization, I thought, as being the data nerd that I am. And we can dig into a little bit more of this again in that when I take you over there. Okay, household income level. The New Jersey median household income is just over $100,000 right now, which totally makes sense. If you look at your pie chart or your bar graph here, the highest percentage that you all have as a collective is right in that range. And then a majority of your patrons are there and above, obviously. You do have a good amount in this 75 to 99. Remember, this is household income, and we've got those 60% married, right? 40% single. So I would make some assumptions that this these two household income levels, the 65 to the 99, might be more single income households than double, especially given the median household income in New Jersey. But that would be fun data to run at another point. Okay, we're going to talk about race and ethnicity reporting again in a little bit. This is just another very cool visualization that's coming from the website I'm going to show you. For those of you that don't know, there was a new federal law passed last October that made race and ethnicity data basically unusable for any companies that wanted to use it. So the state laws have been changing for this anyway, but last October it went national with the federal law. So we've been trying to help folks create workarounds because there are still major grants and things like that that are requiring reporting on such things. But again, this is the snapshot for all of New Jersey, which is just a very cool visualization for this. But like I said, we'll come back to this. Um, and then I just love to shout this out. So thank you for being a friend, New Jersey. Your AIM network had an 87% trade approval rating rate in 2025, which is the third highest we have in the country. And that's awesome for such a large network. Most of our other networks that are higher than you all are 4, 6, 8 orgs. So it's amazing. So thank you for being so collaborative. And thank you for being a friend from our Golden Girls. How am I doing on time, Jim? Okay. That's kind of where I'm going to stop for AIM trends. Do we have any questions generally about that data? You can run most of all of these kinds of charts. You can run them in Data Center. So there's a community reports section in your reports module where you can run your community health, your community demographics, your community post-code heat maps, all of those things. So if you're ever curious how things have shifted, you have the power to run those. You don't need me to do that. So excuse me. Um, so you can run those at any time. Similarly with your organization, and you can compare the two if you'd like, which I highly recommend.
No questions so far.
Great. Are we good to dive into some patron loyalty stuff, or do we want to do demographics and census data first?
It's up to you.
All right, we'll just keep going.
Yeah.
Okay, so you all work in arts and culture, so inevitably you've seen a version of this. It's either a stair step, or it's a ladder, or it's a funnel, or it's some type of visualization of the patron loyalty growth that we all track and need. If you haven't seen something like this is what we call the evolution of a patron, right? So most folks come in as prospects, they buy a single ticket, then hopefully they repeat buy. Multi-ticket buyer are folks that buy multiple tickets in one season. Then they become a subscriber or a member, and then they donate philanthropically, and then they become an advocate or a major investor in your organization. This structure, I like to remind folks, because Data Center was built on this ideology. So the idea that you are building your segments to be single ticket buyers, you're building your segments to be subscriber members, you're using the lists to find your repeat and your multi-ticket buyer. Similarly in there, I would say your lapsed folks as well, because then if they've been here but then have gone back down in your prospects pool, right? It will dramatically affect your cost of sale for those people, things like that. So this is what we're striving to do. We're leveraging our demand and our artistic programming to create and deepen our relationships as folks go up the stair step. because we want and need the recurring revenue. It's also cheaper. The higher folks are up on this stair step, the easier it is to convert them to an additional sale because they're emotionally invested in the organization already. So the cost of sale is lower and the ROI is greater. Here are some examples of exactly how that math works. So if we have a single ticket buyer that buys a ticket at $53, the cost of sale is going to be your marketing revenue, right, out of your revenue. And then your single ticket buyers have a renewal rate of 23% nationally. Subscribers, on the other hand, if you can get them up that stair step, that increases their per patron yield to $156. The cost of sale is higher, 25%, but the renewal rate is significantly higher. So it's a bigger jump. So it costs more money and more time and more investment to get folks to make that leap. But then once they do, it's smooth sailing. So renewing subscribers then, the average yield is $342. The cost of sale drops dramatically to only 3%, and the renewal rate is 69%. And then once they become an advocate in that, adding the donations and all of those things, then the per patron yield is $550. Cost of sale stays at 3%, which is very little. And then the renewal rate is 88%. So while we love the emotional feels of moving those folks up that patron evolution journey, it's just great for the bottom line. Nationally, we have a single ticket buyer churn challenge in arts and culture. So here's just some numbers that they're not great, but it gives us something that we know we need to focus on. So from the 26 or the 16 to 17 season into the 18-19 season, we had 78% of first-time ticket buyers didn't return. From 22-23 to 24-25, it's up 10%. So 88% of first-time buyers didn't return that year. So we're also seeing, so NTF is new to file. So the new to file rate of return, oops. Sorry. Come on, Zoom. Come back.
We can still see your screen here, Jenny.
Oh,
So.
that's weird. Okay. Well, I'm glad. I can't see it. Wonder why. Oh, it says I paused it. How do I? All right, I'm going to stop and redo it because it won't be much help if I can't see what you're seeing.
So while Jenny's rebooting there, does anybody have any questions about either where the data is coming from, these stats are coming from, or around the philosophy of moving patrons through the patron ladder? I know this is a little different depending on what type of organization you are. Not everybody sells single tickets or subscriptions. Some are visual arts organizations, so you have folks coming for one exhibit, and then you're obviously trying to convert them to membership. So the theory of it is consistent, if not the terminology. But no, okay.
Thank you for vamping, Jim.
Sure.
I don't know what's going on with my browser because now I can't full screen it, but I think you all can see it enough. I'm hoping. The other, so we're looking at new to file retention, right? So it's 10% higher than it was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, sorry. And then if you look at pre-pandemic, so this is a big shift that we're noticing. It used to take significantly less time for folks to repeat buy. So new to file to come back. Now we're seeing where it's about 18 months of time between the first and second visit. So it's just helpful to know that it's taking folks longer to come back. Because again, if you're thinking about your patron loyalty stair step, when do you move folks back into prospecting? We would suggest that you now wait a year and a half, if not 2 full years before doing so, because there is a higher chance folks are going to come back within that time frame.
So Jenny, we do have one question that came in. We're wondering if the data you're presenting here, if this is specific to the New Jersey data or if this is national data.
Yeah, this is now national. So these
Okay.
are, this is from our arts and culture benchmark data. I don't have all the specificity with New Jersey specifically, but I think it's helpful to look at our national trends. And then if you have questions about your data, how your data compares to this, I would say, please book some time with me and I'm happy to dig into it with you and see how things are similar or different. So this is the same kind of stat. Okay, so why aren't they coming back? Um, Sometimes we have experience problems. People have a hard time parking. Front of house is ignoring them, or they just can't find the signs to the bathroom, or I don't know. There's all sorts of reasons. But 75% of first timers have decided if they're coming back before they even sit in their seats to see the performance. So it is very little about the art that they see and more about the experience that they have before they get there. Or we're sending them the wrong invitation and the wrong messaging. So if they're a first time ticket buyer and we're all of a sudden asking them for a donation, that might be a turnoff. My CEO loves to use the marriage analogy. If someone's proposing to you after the first date, most folks would have a response that's to put on the brakes a little, like too much, too fast. So sometimes that is. And then sometimes it's just, again, they came to Mamma Mia and we're trying to get them to come back to Arthur Miller. And there's just a disconnect in the programming. This is all coming from the benchmark, right? Which is free to join if you have a CRM that cooperates with our system. It is a partnership with NEA, SMU Data Arts, all of those fun orgs. So this is where all that data comes from. And if you want to join, feel free to do so.
Jenny, is there a list somewhere of the CRMs that are compatible?
Yes, I can send that along afterwards, but if you go to just trgarts.com, it's under this industry resources tab. And if you click on join the free benchmark, a drop down will show up for the CRMs that are compatible. And we are working on more and more of them all the time.
Great.
Okay, just a couple other things that I found really interesting for folks. Again, there's way more data in here than we have time for. But I love I get questions all the time about current, compared to 2019 to pre-pandemic. So I just threw a bunch of data in here and we'll just go through it quickly. And then again, you can look at it later and email me or book time with me if you have questions. So again, this is all North American arts and culture organizations data that we have. You'll see we're down 4% on units. We're down 6% on inflation adjusted revenue. So that is not just 6% down on revenue as if it was the same economy as it was in 2019, but we're 18% higher on all revenues, which is fascinating. Group sizes are way down, 25% down. Frequency is about the same. But again, the time frame from which first timers coming back is longer. We're down 4% current customers, 1% higher in new, and 3% higher in reactivated customers. So, oh yeah, so we're trailing inflation. People are buying less tickets, and they're less loyal to any one arts and culture organization. Okay, but this is why everything feels hard. I have a lovely colleague who says, I just want it all to feel a little easier. But her tagline is why is everything hard? it's taking more customers to fill the same number of seats as it did in 2019 because folks are buying less tickets, they're spending less money, which is tricky. Okay, so here's another kind of revenue snapshot. The blue vertical bar are the number of tickets in the 18 to 19 season, and then the orange are the number of tickets in the 24 to 25 season, and then the lines are the revenue. So the darker green is 18-19, and the lighter green is 24-25. So we are parallel in the most part with revenue, but a little bit higher. But again, we're not making up all of that inflation ground. And then it's just interesting to see mostly the 18-19 season, most months, they had significantly more number of tickets sold than we did in 24-25, with the exception of holiday, which is very interesting to see. So I hope everyone's holiday programming was selling as well as this data would suggest. So 8% down single tickets, but 21% up in single ticket revenue, which is still 6% down from if we adjust for inflation, right? So this looks great in that, hey, look, our revenues are significantly higher than they were pre-pandemic. But if you put inflation into the mix, we haven't raised ticket prices enough to totally adjust for the inflation that I know we all know and are feeling. This is a different story based off of which sector you're in, or which part of the sector. So you'll see there, oops, too far. Dance is at 13%. Music is at 21%. And this is percent revenue change from, again, that same 18-19 year. Packs are at 17% and theaters are at 23%. So this is basically the lower percent on this graph, the better you're doing with revenue. So that's interesting. Here's our single ticket numbers. Ooh, the colors are off down here. But it's the same as it was in the previous chart. So the orange is 24-25, the blue is 18-19. So we're, generally significantly above the single ticket prices. Again, not quite to where inflation would be. Okay, I'm gonna run out of time. So I'm gonna skip some of these. Like I said, you will get this. This is a cool one. So this is the generation. This is what I was talking about. So if we look at this compared to the generational breakdown that you all had in just New Jersey, it's not that far off, right? 32% boomers, 31% Gen X, 25% millennials. Yours was slightly lower than that on the millennial generation, and then slightly below the national average for Gen Zers. But the change in proportion, this is the one that's really hurting folks, right? So the baby boomers, while it looks like we have 9% less baby boomers than we did in 2019, and we have 9% more millennials. Shouldn't that average out? But the problem is the boomers are the ones that are most often the fixed seat subscribers. They're the folks that add on their donation every December to get the tax write-off, right? They're much more habitual in their theater going or performing arts going than the younger generations. So while this is a great sign that we're seeing all these millennials activate, their revenue spend is not going to be as high, and because their loyalty is not created there yet. We don't have as many generations to make them fall in love with the ballet or the art museum or whatever that we did with the boomers. So this is one of the reasons why that idea of it's taking more patrons to fill the same amount of seats, to fill the same amount of revenue, this dramatic shift in the generations is part of it. Okay, performances per customer. Subscriptions. This one is a good one to call out. There's a frequent narrative in arts and culture that subscriptions are dead, right? We hear it all the time. We are not seeing that in the data. So if you look at these are subscriptions, again, 18-19 compared to 24-25. Subscription tickets are up 13%. Subscription revenues are up 44%. And if we adjust for inflation, we're still up 13%. So this is telling a very different revenue story than some of the narratives you've probably heard around subscriptions. The other thing that's wonderful about this, right, is the whole idea of annual recurring revenue, right? Again, if you look at that per patron yield that we talked about in the beginning, the cost of sale is 3%, right, to get those folks to renew every time. And the revenue continues to grow as they continue to be more invested in the organization. So if you don't currently have a subscription or you think that you don't need one, it doesn't have to be the fixed, first Sunday of the month in the same orchestra seats as, it doesn't have to be that. The younger generations really do prefer like a flexible package and things like that. But we would say it's definitely worth leaning into time and energy into subscriptions because we are seeing the return on the revenue. Yeah, more stuff in here. Here's the more details about the subscription resurgence are in here. Okay, general look at donations really quickly. 14% increase in gifts, 12% increase in revenue, but 11% decrease if we adjust for inflation. So again, donations are doing well, but not quite as high as we need them to be if we're adjusting for inflation. Yeah, so the average gift 2019 was 1,722, which is worth $2,161 in 2025. But the average gift size in 2025 was only 1,690. So, and I know I'm seeing this with clients that I talk to a lot. They're seeing maybe an increase in first-time donors or folks giving at a lower level, or people are decreasing their giving. So we're just seeing a decrease in the amount of gift size, which I think is part of the reason why we're not keeping up with those inflation numbers. Okay, new normal. There's some really interesting things in here of what we're seeing. So subscription is rebuilding, but our single tickets and donations growth enough to help us balance all of our budgets. And I don't know, that's a question for you all in your specific budgets and things. Okay. Any questions about this data? And then I want to jump over to some census things and talk about race and ethnicity a little bit in more detail.
No, we're good.
Okay, great. All right. If I jump over here, do you come with me?
Yes.
Are you seeing? Okay, great. So this is datausa.io. It is my favorite website for anything census data related. The government websites that have the census data, it's very hard to use. So I highly recommend using this instead. It is just a much more pleasing visual experience, and it's much easier to use and much easier to take a look at. Now, I have this pulled up in New Jersey, but you can do each zip code. So you'll see, if we go back to the homepage here, you can look at each individual. I don't know mine. You can look at each individual zip code, each individual city, all of those things. Congressional districts, if you really wanted to be that specific. You'll also see that it does things like this. So New York, Jersey City, like that metropolitan area. So you can also look at the universities specifically as well. So there's a lot of ways to slice and dice this data. This Down here, you will see your population by gender. You can filter by men or women, and then all the race and then ethnicity categories. With every chart, you can go save, look at the raw data set, which is the census data, right? Or you can just save the image, or you can share and embed. So this is a very user-friendly way to look at your census data. The reason that we're looking at census data, not only is it a helpful tool to look comparatively against your patron population comparatively to your city as a whole or your state, but because that federal law pulled the race and ethnicity data from public use, corporate use, on an individual level, the only way to get this data currently is to use these maps to get correlated race and ethnicity data instead of the individualized data that you had previously. So what I would recommend is in Data Center, run your postal code heat map for your organization or for your year or whatever. We'll do the training on how to do that at the end. But then you'll have your percentages of what population you're serving of each zip code. And then you can come through here and get your race and ethnicity breakdowns here. So if I am serving half of the New Jersey population, right, which obviously you're not, but it's easy math for my brain, then you could kind of assume that your audience looks similar to this, right? It's just a half of the population. Now, generally, right, we know arts and culture tends to skew wealthier and it tends to skew white. But there's no way to actually prove that right now with the federal law that has changed. So if you have a grant application that is asking you for populations served is often the phrase that they use, and they're requiring race and ethnicity numbers, I would recommend that you use this and just have a line, if you can, to say that these are correlated race and ethnicity numbers and not direct from patrons.
Yeah, if I could chime in. So just in other words, if we said like, our audience is primarily in Camden County, New Jersey,
Mhm.
we could then go look and pull this data on Camden County, New Jersey and say this is correlated data
Yeah.
for what our
So you're right. So we're probably seeing 50%, like pretend this was the county that you talked about.
Mhm.
We're probably serving about this breakdown of race and ethnicities. Um, and then if you do that with each of your, I don't know, top 5 or top 10 populated zip codes, then, just throw that in a spreadsheet and it'll give you overall percentages. Because as you change which data set you're looking at, these numbers will adjust a little bit. So if it's 50% for one county and then it's 45% white for another and it's 80% white for another, right? You can put those numbers in and average them out, and it'll give you approximate numbers for the audiences that you're serving. I do recommend doing it on based off of each zip code or each zip code, because you do have household numbers in the postal code heat map from Data Center. So I think that's about as specific as you're going to be able to get in this moment. The other option, which I have seen a lot of clients do at the moment, is they're just choosing to report generation instead of race and ethnicity. So we know that as generations get younger, we're getting more diverse just because of population change generally. And some people are just choosing to say, this is the data set that I have that's more accurate. And you grant people can go make assumptions on the race and ethnicity that we're serving. So, it's hard, especially when the NEA, if you've ever applied for those grants, it's a giant application. Their requirements for race and ethnicity data are still in those applications, even though they're a federal agency, and the federal law is the one that changed it to make that data point unavailable for organizations, right? So it's complicated. But if they are absolutely requiring numbers, this is how I would recommend that you do it. Again, only for your top 5, maybe top 10 zip codes, because otherwise it's just way too much math to do. And again, you can view the data here if you don't want to use the visualization. This little view data button will give you that. But I do think this is really a cool way to look at it. And again, you can toggle and see how things have changed over the years, right? So if I look at 2013, 58.5% white, 2023, 51.9%, right? Which again, that tracks with what we know about general population change in the United States as a whole.
Great. No, this is really helpful. And I know we've used it when we were specifically trying to target a more diverse audience with an acquisition mailer. We looked at counties that had more diverse audiences and then targeted mailings into those counties as a way
Yeah.
to work around it. So,
Yeah. It's a great resource for prospecting as well, right? I was just talking to someone who they're doing a bilingual children's play that's in Spanish and English. And so they were looking at this just to see which of their zip codes around them had a higher percentage of Spanish speaking or Hispanic audiences. To make sure that they were advertising in the places where people would see it.
great.
So yeah, great use of that.
Well, I do
Um,
see we're moving in on time, so I think we want to make sure we
okay.
leave time for the
For
training
training.
section. Yeah.
Okay. So again, I'll put
I did
this.
drop your email into the chat, by the way, Jenny, so people have your email.
Great. Yes. Please email me if you have questions about this. But again, this is datausa.io. It's far and above easier to use than the census websites themselves. So, but there is a whole education section. So we were talking about higher ed in New Jersey. There's a lot. You can dig into that if it's interesting to you and your organization. It's really interesting data. Okay. Do we have any last questions before we dig into some specific data center training things?
Not that's come through now.
Okay, great. I'm just going to switch over. All right. Okay, so this is data center, as you all have probably seen it. This is our Pikes Peak Orchestra account. This is fictional. It doesn't actually exist. It's the one we use for trainings and such things. But as you can see, all of your segments, they're always built the same way. So you have the year, which we recommend being the end of your fiscal. So if you have a 20, like a slash season fiscal year that spans, which most of us do, spans calendar years, we recommend it being the end of the fiscal, just like you would report on in, your audit or things like that. So 2025, the 3-letter segment code is going to correspond to where they are in that stair step, right? So we've got single tickets. Here, you've got subscriptions, you've got flex if you do that as well, memberships. It's not in this list because Pikes Peak Orchestra doesn't have any, but there's also an admission type if you're a museum. There are different segments for comps and discounts if you're tracking those differently and want to look at those to see if maybe the like acquisition promo code that you were putting in certain neighborhoods is reaching those folks. You could import that segment separately and then run your postcode heat map to see if it's working the way that you thought. There's also a general category. That's one that we use for things like staff and board that we want to include in certain things, but suppress from others. It's up to you how you want to use all of those. But they're always formatted the same way. And then the segment description. The segment description, if you import one segment at a time, which I'm going to show you in a second, this is a free text field. If you're importing a bunch of data on one file, this segment description is going to pull from a specific field in your CRM. So if it's subscriptions, it's probably package name. If you're pulling in single tickets, it's probably performance name or something like that coming out of your CRM. You'll see here that we have, this is how we recommend doing things by giving level. If you have a basic license and there's no transactional data in your account, you can do it like this, right? Where you're just importing basically at each giving level as its own segment. So you can track your gift level movement and things like that. The visible for trade flag here is exactly what it sounds, is if things are visible for trading in the network. If it's not there, then it's not visible for trade. So you have total control over what is visible to the network and what is not. You can also batch change these. So if I wanted to just remove, I would just click on the check boxes and then say not visible for trade, and it's going to take the flags off of there. The segments module here, the only thing you're going to use this for is for updating segments. You could click the little gray pencil to change the naming conventions or the segment type or the year or anything that you've put in if you've changed your naming conventions or made a mistake or things like that. Just the little edit pencil over here. You're going to start with imports. I like to start with segments so you know where we're headed. And then over here, this should be a very simple export from your CRM, import into here. If you find yourself doing a lot of Excel gymnastics, call me because you shouldn't have to be doing that. We're just going to come in here. We're going to hit import file. 90% of the time, you're going to be importing segments. If you click add or update patron contact info, it will just update people's information that are already on a segment. It's not going to import additional segments if you click this option. Import segments 90% of the time. It'll mostly be house data. Most of it will contain patrons' names and mailing address. Most of it's going to come from a CRM. This dropdown will give you the choice of which CRM it's coming from. If you don't see your CRM, email me or the help desk and we will get it added. The only requirement is that there is a unique patron identifying number to the person. We run into this issue with Ticketmaster, Shopify. They have a unique identifying number per transaction, but not per patron. I like to joke it's just was built for capitalism. It tracks the money and not the humans. So if those are your CRMs that you're using, you want to select no. It's not coming from a CRM because the system then won't require you to map a patron ID number. For our purposes here, though, we are going to stick with this. Okay, next two options. These are worded a little confusingly. Update segments to match what's in the file means we're going to create a brand new segment or we're going to override an existing segment. Option 2 is you're going to add patrons to a segment that already exists. Most of the time you'll use the first one. You're doing these after shows have closed, things like that. If you have a segment that is something like 2026 individual giving that you are adding to every month, then you would want to select the second option. Now, again, here's where you have the choice. You can do one segment at a time, or you can do a file that has a bunch of different segments within it. Depends on your CRM, depends on how your brain works, how the cadence of your programming. If you do one segment at a time, again, these are just free text fields. This is now, you can see every segment type that is available here. Again, there's the discount and the comp like I recommended. Education class, here's the admission one for the museums, all of these kinds of things. This one, it happens to be a subscription. So I'm not going to fully import this, but you'll get the idea. And then these are theater repacks. Now, if you're importing a bunch of data in one file, you're going to need columns to match these three things. So you're going to need a segment year, you're going to need a segment type, and you're going to need a segment description. Now, most likely, segment year and segment type are going to be columns you need to add into the file before you import. Segment description, again, hopefully you're just mapping something like performance name, package type, campaign name if you're importing donations by campaign, things like that. And then this is where we map all of our fields. So like I said, patron ID number, you'll see is required as well as address and full name or first and last name. If you select that does not come from CRM option at the beginning, it will not require a patron ID. So again, that is specifically useful for especially Ticketmaster because it doesn't work that way. Then all you need to do is come over here and click the fields as they map. If you are about to embark on a journey where you're importing a lot of data for a lot of different files, I would recommend doing one, letting it fully import until it's import complete, and then doing more. The reason why is because Data Center will remember how you've mapped all your fields if one file is complete, and it'll remember it for 30 days. So if you are at the end of a season and you're doing all of the season's data, and it's just easier to do it one show at a time, do the first one, let it fully complete its import, and then your life will be easier in all of your subsequent files. As you can see, I'm just mapping. These are the fields that came out of my file. These are the fields where I'm mapping into TRG, and I'm just making sure that everything is good. Any data that is in the file that you don't want imported, you just don't map and it will ignore. So that's why I say if you export from your CRM and there's a lot of data, like especially with, I don't know, Patron Manager or Test, if you have saved exports, that it's just easier to use for this purpose, but there's a lot of transactional data or things like that, just ignore it and Data Center will ignore it. So you don't need to delete all of that data before you come in here to import. This hopefully will be a simple, easy process for you. Okay, and then it's going to give me a quick scan. No issues. It's going to tell me this is a new segment, right? So if I'm trying to add to an existing segment, then I'm like, oh no, this is new. I don't want to do that. And I can go back. Similarly, if I was trying to add to a segment that exists and this says new, then I know I messed up something and I can go back. It'll give you the approximate count, and this is how things are going to show up in segments once it's complete. So if all of that looks good, you just hit finish. It's going to do its thing. Import time varies wildly depending on how busy the servers are, how big your file is, all of that kind of stuff. But it's anywhere between like 1 hour to 6 hours or so, depending on, again, if everyone's importing data that day, it's going to be a little bit slower. Once the data imports, then all of it's going to show up here in your segments module. And then you can really dig into your campaigns, which is where you use your segments, the building blocks of all of your data, to look at your research or do your direct mail or all of those things. We are going to run out of time, so I don't want to dig into a lot of the uses of Data Center right now, but you can always book time with me. We do have in the little question mark up here help topic articles and things that you can take a look at, or you can watch some trainings or things like that if you are a person that would rather watch a video than talk to me directly, which I totally get. No judgment here. So there is the segmentation and import training, which is kind of what we just went over. And then there is the campaigns and reporting training, which is kind of the next step with what you do with your segments once they're in Data Center itself. But I would also say if you have specific questions about your data or your patron behaviors or whatever, it's good to come to meetings with me with those questions in hand or in the back of your mind, just because then it helps me make sure you're getting the maximum use out of Data Center. I went through that very quickly because I know we're short on time, but this is just the beginning of our relationship. You can, like I said, email me. I will make sure that Jim has my meeting scheduler link as well. It is in the deck at the end, so you can always book time.
Great. I also say, first of all, does anyone have any last questions for Jenny? Because we are near the end today. Not seeing any. This is the first of 3 AIM summits we're doing this year. The other 2 will be more Zoom meeting format, so it'll definitely be more open to conversation and discussion than this was. The first one of the year, we'd like to present that sort of overview data and touch on a few things. But we're going to be doing another one of these in May that is going to be specifically devoted to marketing related topics. And then we're going to be doing another one in October that will be devoted to individual giving and development related topics. So this is the first of 3 of these that we'll be doing throughout the year. And as Jenny said, The best way, if you have specific questions, is to look at the videos and then book a time with her directly, so that she can help you either get started or to help you take the next step in your journey. So thank you, Jenny. We also have, just want to let folks know, coming up in April and September, we are going to be doing some regional in-person Jersey Arts marketers meetups where we're going to, address whatever topics those meetings are going to address. But also that'll be time that you can speak with the ArtPride staff if you have questions. We're not nearly as good as Jenny, but sometimes we can help answer some questions there. And then we do have our next webinar for ArtPride is on April 15th. It's a Jersey Arts Action webinar, so it's going to be around advocacy related questions, things that are happening in DC, things that are happening in the New Jersey level. I know they're doing a little schoolhouse rock legislative, how a bill becomes a law, kind of how the legislative process works, because we get a lot of questions about that. So we decided to lean into it. So that we're doing that, and then we have Arts Advocacy Days in March. So they'll be reporting back as to what happened in DC during Arts Advocacy Day. So that'll be happening on April 15th. You can get information on these that are currently available now, or ones that are going to be added at artpridej.org/events. So with that, we are right up against 2 o'clock. So I want to thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon. Really hope you found this information helpful. Thank you again, Jenny, for joining us from LA. And we look forward to seeing you at more of these in the future. So have a great afternoon.